Great. Looks like we're recording. Hello again. Welcome to this module, relatively short module, but a very important topic, defining the project scope. So this is the one where we're going to document and agree the project scope on an iterative basis, which means we start out documenting enough to start work, and then throughout the project we keep refining it, and it's probably subject to changes as well. Let me just put my glasses on so I can see the annotation screens on that. So that's what we're going to do. So again, with all the other modules, if you have any questions at all, just drop me an email or a message and I'll make sure that I answer your email. So this is our goal for this one, is a well-defined, agreed upon and deliverable project and product scope. So we're going to start by covering what's the difference between the project and the product scope. With all of this information, we want to be able to build an accurate work breakdown structure, or WBS, and we need that in order to do any form of time, cost, or resource estimating as well. So by the end of the session, you'll know the difference between a project and a product scope. You'll know some of the challenges to managing that scope, and you'll also know what a work breakdown structure is, how to construct it, and where it can be useful. Unfortunately, the real world out there is that a poorly defined, communicated, agreed and controlled project scope is in fact one of the leading causes of project failure. You get these situations where people make assumption about what's in and what's out because it's not fully documented and it hasn't been checked with all of the right stakeholders. So my recommendation is, with any work on the scope of the project, is to really take time to fully understand what you're expected to do, but also what you're not expected to do, and document that. And I will repeat myself a few times in this module about that very important issue, about documenting what you're not supposed to do. Make sure you write it all down and get agreement on it from all of the stakeholders who've got an interest in the project scope. I want to start this one with a bit of a humorous take on poor scope definition. And this is with thanks to a website that used to exist called projectcartoon.com. It doesn't exist anymore. So just full credit where it's due. I'm not sure what happened to it. It just disappeared, but it was a website you could go on to, and there is about 20 or 25 different images like this, and you could put your own text under it. I think it even has a Wikipedia page, cartoon tree, something. It's got its own Wikipedia page, but the website's long gone, projectcartoon.com, but this is taken from that. And basically, it's just a humorous way of indicating some of the problems in this instance with poor scope definition. So this one here, how the customer explained it. Obviously, that's what they explained. They wanted a tree swing with 3 different slats. But here's the thing. Watch out, because often the customer doesn't really know what they need. And that's the importance of going back to requirements. Because in this case, that's what they said they wanted, but this is what they actually needed. And I've certainly been involved with some projects where people have delivered what the customer said they wanted, and then the customer's gone, but it doesn't do what I want it to do. So it really pays to not just take what the customer says at face value, but ask them, what does it need to do? What are their requirements for it? And make sure that what they're saying is going to meet their requirements. Because at the end of the day, they may be wrong, but you're the one who's going to take the blame for whatever is delivered. Okay, so with poor scope definition, we've already got differences between what the customer explained and what they really needed. But here's what the project manager understood, because it's all done with verbals, just conversations rather than documentation. That's what they understood. And you have to watch the salespeople, because they're notorious for describing the best, the biggest, the brightest, and then expecting project teams to deliver it. So watch out for them. Definitely include them on the scope and the agreed scope. Obviously, the architect looked at it and thought, well, I'll design something that's a wonderful contribution to the urban environment. Again, and then obviously without proper scope definition, it was handed over to the construction team, and that's in fact what they built. So it's a humorous look at some of the problems that can happen with poor scope definition. So we don't want that. What we want instead is this. What we want is consistency throughout the whole thing. We want what the customer explained and what they really needed, what the project manager understood, what the sales manager described and promised, what was designed and what was built are all the same. And that's what we get with good scope definition. So that's what I'm going to encourage you to do, is good scope definition. So let's start with some of the tools and techniques that you can use. And just a reminder, obviously these modules that you're going through, they're all high-level modules. They reference a book that I've written, Introduction to Project Management textbook. But if you do have any other questions, just give me an email and I can direct you to further resources. So let's start though with that distinction I made earlier on about the difference between the project and the product scope. Now they are different, and it is important to separate them out into any scope statement. I just find that too many times project managers and teams and stakeholders focus far too much on the product scope, and that becomes the scope statement. But that's not the scope statement. That's part of it. In fact, it's a subset of the overall project scope. So the product scope is the one you're all familiar with. This is the function, form, description, and use of the deliverable or output. This is the description of the thing that you're going to build, the technical aspects, anything else, the product scope. But what's really useful to get into the habit of doing is also defining the project scope, all the other work that a project manager and their team must do on the project, which is part of the work to be done. Things like scope management, financial management, budget management, controlling changes, project communications and stakeholder management, regular weekly reporting. What about collecting lessons learned, benefits realization or tracking? What about project closure activities? Now, the benefit of actually documenting all of these things in a project scope is if you put them into the project scope, they then become part of the expected work to be done on the project, not just building the deliverable. And an example of why this is important is often when project teams get to the end of the project and want to do project closure, for example, the deliverables being done and the team says, well, we've now got project closure to do. You'll often find a senior manager say, no, don't do that. Just get on and build this other thing now, move on to another project. Whereas if you put activities like project closure into the project scope of work, it's now an expected part of the project. And also, if it appears there, you can include it in the work breakdown structure. And if it gets included in the work breakdown structure, then you can allocate time and cost and resources to it. So this time, if it's all there, it's all part of the project scope, when somebody comes to you and says, well, now that the deliverables there, move on to this other project, you can say, no, we haven't actually finished this project yet. We've still got this work to be done. And right at the beginning, we allocated time and cost and resources to it. So that's the advantages there. It's also a great communications device to let people know that you just don't build things, that you do all this other work as well. So make sure you have separate project and product scope statements. Now, I want to emphasize this, and I have mentioned this in a few other modules, and it's worth repeating because it's one of the main mistakes that the profession of project management makes at the moment. And that's to think that projects are there to deliver things, deliverables. Now, I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, and I'm going to say that it's my opinion that no project ever has been approved on the basis of the deliverable, the output, the thing that it's supposed to build. Now, I know you're thinking about that and going, well, hang on a minute, isn't that the sole reason for it, the output, the deliverable? Well, no, that's an important part of the project. But don't forget, that deliverable or output was selected to do something. It was selected to take advantage of an opportunity or solve an issue, either for yourself or for a client. And remember those project initiation documents you did, the charter, the business case, which all outline the reasons, the thing that the benefits that this thing was supposed to do. That's actually what it's there for. So projects are actually there to deliver outcomes and benefits that the deliverable or output provides. So that's the thing. So please, when it comes to the scope, make sure you clearly define not just the product scope and the thing or the deliverable, but you also make it clear that this project is about these outcomes and then these benefits from these outcomes. That's true project success, is focusing on the outcomes and benefits. So it is my opinion that professional project management means that we need to stay focused on the expected outcome or benefit and measure whether we achieve this or not. That's true project success. So that's another reason, obviously, for the project scope to be more broad or broader than just a simple description of the product. I'll let you sit with that idea for a while too, because it challenges a lot of people, this idea that it's not just about the deliverable. So how do we define the scope? Nice, easy, simple steps. And again, this is all high level stuff. You start by collecting the requirements, and I'll show you some of the tips there. Go out and ask people, or ask the client, ask the users what their requirements are, and defining the expected outcomes from that. You then put together a preliminary project and product scope statement and check it with all the stakeholders. Now, the word preliminary is really important here because defining the scope is generally an iterative process. If you happen to be working on a project that is 1 month long or 2 months long, you can probably define the entire scope in one go. That's it. But the longer the project is, the more likely it is that you're going to want to do iterative definitions of your scope, which means that you'll define the broad scope, project and product, but you'll define the next stages in detail and leave the further ones out, the ones further out, a little less detailed. And then as you go through, you'll refine those definitions based on work that's already been done or changes received. So then you're also going to make clear, obviously, what stage you're at with the iteration. Is it version 1? Is it version 2? Is it draft? Is it for construction? That's what you want to make sure that everybody knows, what is the latest version of the scope statement. Now, also make it clear what you are not going to do. I cannot emphasize this enough. It must be written there in your scope statement what you are not going to do. The exclusions should be clear. Now, sometimes you're going to be writing what you think is the blindingly obvious. You go, nobody would ever think we would do this as part of this project. I guarantee you, sooner or later, somebody's going to go, I thought you were doing that as part of this project. And that's why I want you to start writing down everything you're not going to do on the project, even if it's abundantly clear. And the story I tell about this is many years ago, I needed a new heat pump or air conditioning unit put into my house. And I contacted three contractors to come up and give me a price. Now, the prices that I got were all within $100 of each other. This is, a few $1,000s. I think it was like $3,000 or thereabouts for the work to be done. So the pricing wasn't really a great deciding factor between them. But two of the contractors gave me a price that included what they would do. They would supply the heating unit, they would take care of the installation, and there was their price. The third one actually said the following. They said, we will supply this particular heating unit, and I'd asked for a particular model and make. So they were all providing the same heating / cooling unit. But they took the time to say what they wouldn't do. So they said things like, on the day of the inspection, we couldn't see inside the roof cavity. Therefore, we've assumed that we can get back-to-back installation from outside to inside. But if we can't, you'll be responsible for any costs of extra carpentry work needed. I thought, I didn't think that would be a problem. And then they also said, on the day of the inspection, we checked the main power board in the house, and it appears that there is an extra supply there. I think it was like 20 amps they were looking for. And they said, just to be aware, though, if we get there on the day and find out there's not, you'll be responsible. And I thought, that's really interesting. None of the other guys mentioned that was a possibility. Because, of course, with the other two quotes, had I accepted them, I would have just assumed that they would have done all of this. The point was, that was the quote that I actually accepted, and they did the work. Was there any issue with carpentry in the roof cavity? No. Was the power board able to take the extra load? Absolutely. But they just made it absolutely clear, because I know that had I accepted the other quotes and the power board needed to be upgraded, I would have gone, but I just assumed you would have done that. And they would have gone, we never do that. Anyway, so that's what you want to do. Make sure you do the exclusions as well. Once you've got that scope done, you can then use it to start building your work breakdown structure. And as I said at the beginning, by the end of this module, you'll understand how important it is to have a work breakdown structure. So the first step is collecting requirements. And this is literally just going out and talking with people. What are your requirements, technical or non-technical? What do you need this thing to do? What do you need this project to do? The biggest stakeholder you go and chat with will obviously be the client. You'll go and chat with users as well, and you'll break down those requirements into sub-requirements and other technical detail so you can clearly understand what is the thing supposed to do, who wants it to do what. And that's requirements documentation. There's other things too. You can have a requirements traceability matrix, which allows you to trace the requirements and maps them back to larger project deliverables, or to some people use traceability matrices for mapping back to project objectives or even organizational strategy. Now, please keep in mind that once you go out there and ask people for their requirements, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to deliver them. That's part of the process of negotiating and agreeing the project scope. And in terms of who should do this, well, the project manager should be the one who commissions it. But I like business analysts to do this sort of work, whether it's an IT project or a construction project, to get out there and define the requirements and map them and give good traceability matrices. And they're going to go out there and they're going to use these sorts of ways of collecting requirements. They're going to be having interviews, focus groups, workshops, group creativity techniques like brainstorming or thinking outside the box. They'll be sending out questionnaires and surveys to collect information. They'll be making observations on what people actually do and maybe how they use existing products or other deliverables. They'll be making prototypes and presenting them to them. Either like in the construction, they might make a 3D render of a building and get you to walk through it. Or in IT, they might mock up a wireframe of like a website or a new app, and they'll show it, is this what you meant? Benchmarking, comparing what you want to existing solutions on the market, and then just reading lots of documents as well. Hopefully you noticed that most of these tools and techniques, certainly here, we're actually including the prototypes as well. It's just talking with people. That's it. They're just different ways to talk with the users, the clients, and other stakeholders. What are the requirements? And documenting all of those things. So that's a very brief introduction to collecting requirements. Once you've got your requirements, you start to develop the scope statement. Now, there are different words that we can use to indicate what level of detail is in the scope statement. There is statement of work, which is generally a high level, or high level in this instance means lacking detail. So you can have a statement work, which then becomes a preliminary scope statement, which is one of the first iterations of your scope statement, and then it becomes a scope statement as well. So there are some other words you can use if you want to let people know how much detail's in the document they're preparing. But the scope statement should clearly document in increasing detail, they're subject to iterations and progressive elaboration and rolling wave planning, all of the deliverables for the project and the product, any assumptions you've made and any constraints. So that describes what can be done and what may affect it being done as well. And again, just reiterating, the project scope statement should put all of the work to be done on the project and only the work to be done on the project, and also that detailed description of the exclusions. Make sure you get used to this now. And it's that difference again between the product and the project scope statement as well. So that's the document we want. Now that document could be text-based, it could be bullet points, it could be plans, it could be technical specifications, it could be any combination of those things which define and document that scope statement. The particular way you define your scope statement will depend on the type of project that you're doing. Obviously, if you're doing a construction project, the scope statement is probably largely going to be a set of plans and some technical specifications that accompany that. If you're doing an IT project, maybe a software project, it'll largely be text-based with technical details about performance as well. So the way you document it will be really important as well. Look, using the case study that we're using throughout all of these modules of the new community library, here's just a very generic example of a scope statement for that. So let's take a close look at it. Obviously, we've got our project identifying data up here. Hopefully, you've got the joke already about Brandy Carlisle and Jason Isbell. Anyway, if you haven't, go look them up. We've got a high-level project description of what it is. Obviously, this is very generic and very small about this particular library. In reality, it would be a lot longer than that. We've got a clear description of the deliverables, what we expect. We've got a distinction between the project scope and the product scope. And again, this is just generic and high level. We've got a clear description of the inclusions and exclusions, all there. What we know about the milestones right now, obviously this is subject to further work. What's the acceptance criteria, any known constraints, and any assumptions? So again, just the sort of information that you will have in your particular scope statement. Obviously, this is one page, if that, and it's all bullet points. This certainly wouldn't be enough for this particular project, but it just gives you that sort of indication of the sort of things that you would find in your scope statement. And the other thing that is missing off here is version control. Very hard, I write like a 3-year-old with this pointer. Version control. So you'd have version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. And look, this is really important. A few years ago, I was asked by an organization to figure out what had gone wrong on a particular project. It was a large construction project where essentially a lot of protected trees were destroyed. And it was a roading project for a local council. And basically it came down to version control on the scope statement. Essentially what had happened was a final set of plans had been sent out to the contractors to do the roadworks. And those sets of plans didn't identify that all the trees were protected, nor did it have any special construction methodology around the trees. In the interim, the plans were changed with information from the local arborists to recognise the trees as protected, and a particular construction methodology around the trees, like not excavating within the drip line, using geotextile fabric, etc. So the trees but the problem was when that version of the plans was sent out to the contractor's headquarters, when they got that version, they couldn't tell, by looking at the front page, they couldn't tell that that version was anything different from the previous version they had. And they just thought that they'd just been issued a new set of plans, another set of plans, identical. So that's where we found the correct set of plans was at head office, not out on site. Whereas if they'd had clear version 1, version 2, and a clear list of the changes that had been made and within the plans identifying them, that probably wouldn't have happened. So make sure you have the correct version all the time. There's also another funny story about version control. I was in a meeting just recently in the last 18 months, and it's me with, I was project managing for a client, a troubled project, and we had to change a lot of processes. There's a lot of process mapping needed. And so I went with the business analyst that was reporting to me, and I met with the other project manager and their business analyst. We were going to talk about this complex set of processes between two organizations for payment. Millions of dollars traded hands each month, and there was all these defined IT processes for how these work orders would be generated, approved, signed off, paid, receipted, all of those things. And I do remember being in this meeting, and the BA that was with me pulled out a large A3 printout of the process and said, right, this is what we're here to talk about, and put it down. And the other BA said, gave that sort of sound and said, oh, look, you're on version 2. We're already on version 3, and pulled out their printout, which was version 3. And then I just remember the other project manager just got a dismayed look on his face and looked at them both and said, guys, we're actually on version 5, and pulled out his printout. So in that, we had 3 different versions of processes with material differences between them. So immediately after that, we locked down, we gathered all of the ProMap stuff and Visio process mapping and put it all into one folder, locked it all down. And I got the BA who was reporting to me to go buy an actual rubber stamp with red ink and wander around both companies and ask if anybody had anything printed out. And if they do, it got stamped with superseded straight away. So look, version control is really important. But look, as I said, this is a generic description of what a scope statement should look like and the sorts of categories of information that you should have in it. Now, I want to talk about scope creep and gold plating at this point. There is another module that you can do, a very short module on controlling changes to a project, and you should do that. But it's worthwhile mentioning scope creep now because it's a particular type of change control. Now, scope creep, in my opinion, happens because we're all nice people. I know that sounds strange, But this is the way scope creep often happens. You've got an agreed documented scope of work with a client, and you're doing the work for them. And then you're in a meeting with them and they say, hey, have you started building that, I don't know, what, a widget for me? Just call a fictitious widget thing. And you go, oh, no, we haven't really started yet. And they go, well, I don't suppose you could just change the color, say from navy blue to sky blue. And you go, yeah, no problems at all. That's fine. No problems at all. And then a couple of weeks later, you bump into them in a cafe and they go, how's the manufacturing going? Yeah, it's going good. And they say, listen, in the testing, I'm just trying to think of a suitably ambiguous example. In the testing, you couldn't, I know it's supposed to be 10 centimeters in diameter, this widget. You couldn't make it 9.9 centimeters in diameter. And you go, yeah, that's no problem. That's just a tweak of the machining. So that's fine. And you're doing great. And then you meet them again in another meeting, and they just say, look, when you're ready to wrap it, or I don't know what I'm describing here. Could you put it into gold paper rather than silver paper? You go, no problems at all. We haven't even ordered the paper. So you hand over something that's sky blue, 9.9 centimeters in diameter, wrapped in, what do we say, silver paper or gold paper, I can't remember. And the client goes, why is it sky blue? And you go, well, you asked for it to be sky blue. And they go, no, I didn't. You go, yes, you did. Remember that meeting? You asked for it. And they go, I don't recall that. And then they say, why is it 9.9 centimeters? It was documented as 10 centimeters. And you said, well, remember when we bumped into each other in that cafe and you asked for it? And they go, no, I asked, was it possible? And you went, oh, but I thought you wanted it. And they said, no, I just wanted to know, was it possible? You see what the problem here is? That the project manager thought they were just doing what the client wanted and just verbally agreeing to everything. Now, you should be prepared for change, but scope creep means undocumented change. That's that keyword there, undocumented. In each of those instances, what should have happened was the project manager would sort of said, I hear you. I'll tell you what, when I get back to my computer, I'll send you an email. And that email should have said something like, the approved document says navy blue, you want to go to sky blue. I can confirm there's no implications of cost or time. Could you please confirm that it's sky blue? And they'll come back to say, yep, I want it sky blue. There you are, you've got it in record, you've got it in writing and it's on record. You can put that into your change register, change number 32, client asked to go from navy blue to sky blue on this day, and here's the URL to the saved email. That's how you get around scope creep. Okay, change happens, you should be ready for it, but it's got to be documented. Okay. Gold plating, on the other hand, is you doing really nice things for the client without asking them. You see an opportunity to give the client more than what they want. You think they'll love it. And you just do it without asking them. You change the scope unilaterally to exceed the client's expectations and your opinions. Often it works, but I've seen where a team upgraded a piece of software because new technology came out while they were building it, and thought the client would be really excited. And when they handed it over, the client said, you do realize our hardware can't run that. And for our hardware to run it, we would need to spend several $100,000 as an upgrade. I wish you'd asked us beforehand. So gold plating's, again, the same sort of thing, undocumented changes. The key thing with any change, to deal with scope creep or gold plating, is go and get the change documented and agreed. And this is a message that I will repeat during the change control module as well. So I'll see you there. Okay. Now let's get on to the work breakdown structure, the WBS, the mighty WBS. Now it is really important to have a WBS. How important is it? Well, put it this way. If as a consultant, I come in to audit your project or do a health check or give any advice, and I ask, have you got a work breakdown structure? And you give me a blank look, straight away, I know you don't understand the scope of work. I don't trust your time estimates. I don't trust your cost estimates. And your project's probably, in my opinion, going to be up for failure. That's how important it is to have a work breakdown structure, regardless of whether you're working on construction or IT projects, by the way. It's often referred to as the backbone of the project, hence the nice diagram of a spine over there. It basically takes all of the information in the scope statement and presents it graphically so you can clearly see what you do and don't know about the scope. As we'll see, those parts you can break down to 3, 4, or even 5 levels. You obviously know a lot about those. Parts of the work breakdown structure you can only break down to 2 or maybe 3 levels, indicates you don't know as much about those parts. It's always based on deliverables or tasks as well. You build it through the top down. That's that process of decomposition. And all cost, time, and resource estimates depend on it, or accurate ones too anyway. And it's often said, if you don't have a WBS, you don't have a project. So what does one look like? Well, you know what a breakdown structure already looks like. You know what an organizational breakdown structure looks like. That's that OBS, org chart. CEO at the top, next C level, CFO, COO, CIO, hopefully CPO for Chief Project Officer. Below that, general managers, team leaders, team members. That's a breakdown structure. Well, the work breakdown structure is exactly the same. It is a graphical decomposition. Here's a little video to watch on the work breakdown structure. I'm just going to check that I'm sharing sound. Yep, just had to check the technology that I was sharing sound with you. Okay.
The first thing we will need is our scope statement, because the work breakdown structure is a graphical representation of the scope of our project. So let's grab our scope statement and begin the process of putting together our work breakdown structure. Let's start right at the top by putting our project name into the first square. In this case, we'll call our project Project Whare. This top level should clearly state the project title, which should also reference the final project deliverable. Don't forget to give it a number, and in this case, we'll give it the number 1.0. If we wanted to, we could also go a little bit further with the information that we put into these and include some space to put cost, time, and resources. Below this, we can put the second level of the breakdown, and this should really be the areas in which we have divided up the work of the project. In our case, we will have one area of work related to the project management activity that we're going to do on the project, such as reporting, cost control, schedule management, risk management, and other things such as lessons learned and project closure. We will give this one the number 1.1. We are using a simple example, and so for our house project, we might include at this level design, consenting, and build as 3 other elements in this level, and they would be numbered 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4 respectively. The third level of our work breakdown structure is the work package level, and this is where we break down what we know about the scope of work and begin to describe it in a little more detail. So under 1.1, project management, we could include things like reporting, lessons learned, and project closure. Obviously, we could go into a great deal more depth, but for the purposes of this exercise, we're keeping it simple. Each of these things has a number as well, which in this case would be numbers 1.1.1, 1.1.2, 1.1.3. Remember that these numbers should align with the numbering in your cost accounting system. Now we can move on to breaking down the design, consenting, and build elements of the project. Under the design element, we may have 2 work packages, one called preliminary design and the other called final design. They would be numbered 1.2.1 and 1.2.2 respectively. Don't forget to keep adding in space to put cost and time and resource estimates in as well. Under the consenting element, we would have local council planning consent and building consent. Under the build element, we could break this down into the natural order of how our house is built. This could start with site works and excavation, then another element would be laying the foundation, then erecting the walls, erecting the roof, plumbing and electrical, exterior and interior cladding, and painting and carpet laying, for example. If we wanted to go into one more level, that would be the activities level, and obviously it's getting down into quite a lot of detail. Most work breakdown structures will go to at least 3 levels, the work package level. Definitely go to the activity level for parts of the scope that you are certain about. And you may want to go one further level, to task level, although you would have to weigh up the benefits of getting this detailed against the time and effort taken to do it. What you will notice is that if you can only go down to the second level of any part of your work breakdown structure, it indicates that you don't really have clarity around the scope of work at that point, and that is absolutely fine as long as you communicate that to people. Remember that it does mean that your estimates for cost and time won't be as accurate as for those parts of the project where you can break the work down to work package or activity level. Now that we have the work breakdown structure in front of us, we can see how bottom-up estimating can be so effective. Bottom-up literally means taking the estimates from the bottom of the work breakdown structure and adding them up to get an aggregate estimate. So if we do cost or time or resource estimates down at the lowest level of the work breakdown structure, they will probably be quite accurate because the description of the work is quite detailed at this level. If we then add each of these up to the layer above and keep adding those layers right up until the top layer, we will have an accurate estimate for costs, time, or resources. One final tool to talk about is the Work Breakdown Structure Dictionary. Obviously, in each of the nodes in the work breakdown structure, there's not a lot of information we can give you about the task or activity to be done. The Work Breakdown Structure Dictionary, on the other hand, allows us much more space to write more information about the task. It would be a separate document that we would simply use the WBS numbering system to write more information about the task so that if anyone had any questions about the work to be done, how to get the cost estimate, the time estimate, or the estimate of resources, and any other information we want to give people about the work to be done, it would be easily found.
So there we are. That's your introduction to a work breakdown structure. So now you begin to see just how useful it is. These are some of the benefits of the work breakdown structure. They really help you understand what you do and don't know about the project, because those areas you can break down to third or fourth levels, you obviously know a lot about those. Those that you can only break down to the second level, you obviously don't know much about those at the moment, but you will later on as part of progressive elaboration. Who should do the WBS? Well, the project manager and the team doing the work should put it together. So it helps assign and explain the work, and it also gets buy-in from them. Having a work breakdown structure that you can show to team members and stakeholders and use for reporting really helps with that communications too, and it does gain buy-in from stakeholders. All of your time and cost estimates, as you'll see when you do the module on estimating techniques, rely on a work breakdown structure for accuracy, which means that the lower level you go down on a work breakdown structure, the more accurate your estimate is. And we'll talk about that estimates always have uncertainty in them. And so the lower level you go to, the more accurate you're going to be. It should always map back to your cost accounting system. So if you're using a large ERP like Oracle or SAP, you'll have these WBS numbers generated for you anyway, and you should be able to map the numbers in the WBS system back to your cost accounting system for really accurate cost reporting. And remember, if it's not part of the WBS, it's not part of the project. So here's just another simple example. This is for obviously a new house here, and we've got a major deliverable at the top. That's the top level. It gets broken down into the component parts. This would be the project scope of work. This would be the product scope of work over here. And just breaking things down into the second level, third level, and fourth level. Obviously, going down to 5 levels is pretty much accepted as the furthest you would go, because that level of detail, you're getting really, really specific there. I did have somebody recently who told me they went down to 9 levels, which I found hard to believe. I can't see any need to ever go down past, I mean, me personally, I've never been past the 4th level for a work breakdown structure. I certainly know in theory and in textbooks that going down to the 5th level is possible, but this person insisted they went down to their 9th level, and I still find that very hard to believe. I should have asked for proof. So yeah, you break it down according to how much you know about it, and that's what you do, break it down, work breakdown structure. So what does it do? Where does it end up? Because you don't often see it like this, by the way. You don't often see it as this graphical decomposition. It often appears in table form, or look at this. Some of you may recognize this straight away as this is a screenshot from Microsoft Project. a piece of scheduling software. If you don't know what it is, it's one of the most popular pieces of scheduling software, but it does so much more than that. And there is another module you can select to do on how to put together a Gantt chart using scheduling software. And for that module, we do use a free version of scheduling software called Project Libre. And it looks just like this, by the way. But this is a screenshot from Microsoft Project. And obviously over here, you got the Gantt chart. But here, look at this. This is your work breakdown structure. See, the top level is the house project. The next level down will be design process, pricing process, council consenting process, and building process. That would be level 2. And then level 3 are these tasks here. So we're going down to a third level here. And we've got our numbering system there, which is one of the automatic numberings you can switch on. One of the columns you can add in to Microsoft Project. So that's actually where it ends up there. So that's a great use of the work breakdown structure too. So it's not just an abstract concept. So and obviously if it's here too, it can map straight back to your cost accounting system. And you can also, under the view command here, go show me the work breakdown structure, and this will turn around and show you all of that as a work breakdown structure. I've often said that, just as an aside, and I'll repeat this in the module on scheduling and how to do this as well. The Gantt chart here is simply a combination of the work breakdown structure and the network diagram. That's all it is. And the inventor of the Gantt chart, Mr. Gantt, Henry Gantt, I imagine one day was frustrated with having to do a network diagram and a work breakdown structure, and simply said there's got to be a better way to do this. So this Gantt chart is just a combination of the work breakdown structure information here, the information that you'd find in a network diagram about dependencies and durations, and then it gets turned into a Gantt chart here. So that's what you need there. So that's an essential use of the WBS in order to do a project schedule. Now, we'll just finish up really quickly on this module on ways to do agile scope definition, because they can be a little bit different. So yes, agile projects will use a project scope statement that is a combination of project work to be done and product work to be done. But beyond that, they'll start to use particular language. And a lot of, or some common agile methodologies use things like epics, features, and user stories to describe and define the work to be done on the project or in the iteration that's coming up, or the sprint, whatever terminology that you're using. So the epic is the highest level, and that is a very big and broad description of all of the features and tasks and user stories that have to be done to deliver this initiative. That's the epic. And we break the epic down into particular features. That's exactly what the word says. What are the features that we want the software to do? Or the functionality as well. And then we'll break each of those down into specific user stories, which are manageable chunks that describe very simply the work to be done. And the user stories are the ones that the team will focus on with the next iteration or sprint that they're doing. They'll choose the number of user stories they're going to do based on story points. And that's where this describes the actual work to be done during a sprint. These are normally really short, simple descriptions that take this format that says, as a type of user, I want some goal so that. So it could be, as a particular bank user, I want an app to allow me to log in online or authenticate my profile. So it's just a simple way. They're usually written very simply like that. They can be written, I'm old school, I like index cards or sticky notes, but obviously you've got lots of great software out there like Trello and Jira that does it all automatically as well. So that is typically what some of the specific ways that Agile further defines the work to be done. But they do have a project and product scope statement as well, overarching it, and that breaks down into epics, features, and user stories as well. And then finally, just in terms of scope tracking, this is a Kanban board, which is a very common feature for a lot of agile methodologies, sometimes called a Scrum board if you're using the Scrum methodology. And basically what it shows you is, here is the backlog of user stories, which is put into the backlog by the product owner. The team will prioritize which ones, or the team and the product owner will prioritize which ones are ready to go next. and they'll get dragged into an iteration which gets measured like this. So these are the particular user stories that are being done in this iteration. This is the status of each one of them. These ones are in progress, these ones are in peer review, these ones are being tested, and these ones are being completed. It's meant to be visual, it's meant to be easily seen. I'm not a big fan of Kanban boards or Scrum boards being digital on screens. I'm a really old school kind of guy. I like them to be big on big whiteboards or on walls. The whole intention of the Kanban board is to quickly and very visually get a status update on where work is in the project. So, and I think it defeats the purpose if it's captured on somebody's computer screen that you have to log in and see. So yeah, keep that in mind. So that's the way that we do it. So look, that's our very high level introduction to project scope. Obviously included the project scope, product scope, work breakdown structure, all of those things. So I want to know if you've been paying attention. So once again, on the left-hand side, we've got some particular words that we've covered. And on the right-hand side, we've got some descriptions. Let's see if you can match them up. So the first one is work breakdown structure. Is it A, B, C, D, or E? Take a moment, read through those, and let me know. A, B, C, D, or E? You can't really let me know because this is a recording. Well, there's a sense of pride in it for you getting it right, isn't it? Okay, right. Okay, right. So you've read through them, A, B, C, D, or E. Hopefully, you selected D, a way of breaking down the work to be done on the project into its component parts. Well done if you got D. What about the next one? Project scope. I'm going to give you a clue here because the next one, number 3, asks for product scope. So as you're reading through the definitions, make sure you can distinguish between project scope and product scope. So is it A, B, C, or E? What do you think for project scope? Okay, well, hopefully you chose B, a description of all of the project management work to be done on the project, or the non-product based work. So then what is product scope? Well, hopefully you chose A, a description of the technical requirements and characteristics of the deliverable. Remember, it's important to have both. So the last two are scope creep and requirements, and it's either C or E. So scope creep is either the uncontrolled small changes to a project that have a large cumulative impact, or it's E, attributes expected of both the project and product scope from project stakeholders. You know straight away that requirements is E and scope creep is C. So there we are. So I hope that was useful to you. Obviously, just recapping, we want you to focus on defining the project scope and the product scope. Make sure you include all of your exclusions, what you're not going to do on the project. Get buy-in from all the stakeholders. Manage the different iterations of the scope, so everybody's working on the current scope. Control changes to it. Don't let scope creep happen, that undocumented change. Turn all of that information into a work breakdown structure with that process of decomposition, and then use the work breakdown structure for cost accounting and time and cost and resource estimates and scheduling and all of that. So there we are. So thank you very much. I've appreciated your attention. And once again, with all of the modules, if you have any questions at all, drop me an email or a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you very much, and have a great day.